Okay, that was quite inspiring. Thank you, Jihad. I had a 10-page introduction of Professor Choueiri. I have to reduce them to 2 because we're running out of time. So Professor Choueiri, Professor of Applied Physics at the Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department at Princeton. He's associated faculty at the Astrophysical Sciences Department in Plasma Physics at Princeton. His work is predominantly in plasma physics with a variety of applications that include plasma thrusters and turbulence. His lab, the Princeton Electric Propulsion and Plasma Dynamics Lab, is a recognized center of excellence in research in the field of advanced spacecraft propulsion. Professor Choueiri received numerous awards, as you may know. They include the Medal of the Order of Cedars in Lebanon. He was founding president of the Lebanese Academy of Sciences and was recently elected as the president of the Electric Rocket Propulsion Society, which is a worldwide community. We had the chance to have a conversation with Professor Choueiri yesterday. We also learned about his research as head of the 3D Audio and Applied Acoustics Lab at Princeton. He invented a new technique for producing tonally pure 3D sounds from 2 loudspeakers. And this technology, called Bach 3D, is currently used in consumer and professional audio products. Yesterday also, Professor Choueiri shared with us fascinating and inspiring stories about his ambitions and dreams as a young teenager growing up in Tripoli in the 70s. And today I'm very pleased to announce that we're going to have more insight into Professor Choueiri's unique personality, as he will be presenting the Mind Garden Discovery and Invention in Academia. Edgar.
I should start by saying that my mom's biggest disappointment to this day is that I did not go to AUB. And I've tried for years to explain to her that Princeton is a little bit like the equivalent of the AUB in America. The American University of Beirut, the AAUB, I tried to tell her, she never bought it. So today, Mom, look, here I am. Lebanese moms are always right. AUB is a great university. It has produced among its graduates and faculty superb statesmen, ministers, diplomats, writers, thinkers, scientists, musicians, artists, and anarchists. And I'm referring only here to Tariq Mitri and Jihad Touma. At the beginning of this event, an invited speech by my friend and Arak drinking companion in New York City, Nassim Taleb. I will take advantage of having this unique chance to deliver the last speech by giving him a rebuttal, a chance he never allows me in New York. Nassim thinks he's always dead right. But he also once said, you will get the most attention from the people who hate you. However, with Nassim getting a lot of attention these past few days from those who love him, we have proven him dead wrong. He also once said, the people I go after are the false prophets. Fortunately, I think I'm safe from his proverbial wrath, as I will speak to you about a topic on which I confess, like Jihad did, I am no expert at all. I may know something about space physics and 3D audio, but instead, I will be speaking to you about education policy and reform, areas in which I have, like Jihad confessed, 0 credentials. So do take what I will be telling you with a grain of salt. I will be speaking to you about building what I see as the ideal college, but only speaking as an academic scientist who happens to be teaching. Listening to me would be like listening to a foot soldier in the trenches pontificate about grand military strategy, a domain better left for true generals. So may the true generals, Dean McGreevy and President Waterbury, forgive me this encroachment, although I'm heartened that you might find in what I will say echoes of their comments yesterday. The AUB anarchist in residence, the aptly named Jihad, whose famous Tuma family distillery is the main source of the arak Nassim and I consume in New York, just gave us an example of intellectual mischief in academia. As another practicing academic scientist, I will come out from the same trenches and the same trenches we share, arak glass in hand, and lob a sort of anarchistic grenade of my own. I will argue that for a model of this ideal college, we should not be looking at an MIT, but rather HIT. Now, you might well ask, what on earth is this HIT? Well, I'm told, albeit by sources whose veracity I cannot really vouch for, HIT is the prime source of graduates who dominate the immensely successful and rival corporations, McDonald's and Burger King. HIT is, in fact, Hamburger Institute of Technology. Its motto, I'm told by the same sources, is flipping the burgers of the world. You must now be asking, HIT as a model for the ideal college, the ideal liberal arts college? Yes, I am dead serious. Before I argue the case of HIT as a model, I will start with another model to emulate, another good model to emulate, one that is perhaps at the other end of the spectrum from HIT, the University of Oxford. To understand the essence of Oxford, one must understand the importance of two things, the smoking room and the tutorial. To explain the first, I have imagined the following conversation. Sir Humphrey Fungi Phipps, the retired master of a venerable Oxford college, was once asked, "How would you build the ideal college?" "That is easy," Sir Humphrey said. "I would build a smoking room." "A smoking room? Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he answered. "That's it? Only a smoking room?" Well, the master reflected further while rubbing his gray beard. "I guess I could annex to it a library." A smoking room in Oxford is part of an old Oxbridge fixture called the Common Room. No one is allowed to lecture in a smoking room. However, it is the center of the socio-intellectual life of the college. Even today, long after Havanas were banned in the junior and senior common rooms of Oxford and Cambridge, the smoking room remains the hub of intellectual discourse. It is where mind exploration through the high art of conversation among peers is practiced as one practices a professional trade. What Sir Humphrey meant by claiming supremacy of the smoking room in higher education is that one learns mostly by practicing mind explorations with peers. And while the American historian Shelby Foote once said, a university is just a group of buildings gathered around the library, for Sir Humphrey, the library is but an afterthought to the smoking room. The other element worth copying from Oxford's winning formula is the tutorial. In the tutorial, a professor, a don in Oxford parlance, meets in his room with 1, 2, or at most 3 students and the small group engages in rigorous, deep, and intellectually challenging conversations designed to go well beyond what is in the textbook. The students are led to analyze, defend, and critique the freely exchanged ideas. They are led, with or without a glass of sherry, to explore. Many universities have found the tutorial system, also called supervisions in Cambridge, worth emulating. The University of Buckingham in the UK, in the US, Williams College, St. John's College, Ohio University, New College of Florida, Sarah Lawrence, and Harvard, among other institutions, have instituted a form of the tutorial at the center of their educational system. My own university, Princeton, established in 1905 its own version of the tutorial called the Precept, at the instigation of its former president, Woodrow Wilson. Note that Sir Humphrey did not even allude to the classroom. The classroom is the most static, passive, ineffective, and inefficient form of knowledge transmission after riding on the sand beach and airplane skywriting. The poet W.H. Auden called the university lecturer someone who talks in other people's sleep. As a student who slept in class, I cannot really blame my childhood friend, Georges Turquille, right there, for starting to doze off a bit during my speech. A good deal of research has shown that surges of adrenaline released in humans and other mammals during moments of excitement significantly enhance learning capacity. In a pioneering study, scientists at the University of California at Irvine showed that rats injected with adrenaline just after learning a task had significantly enhanced retention. A professor who teaches French at a well-known American college and who took these findings to heart was featured once on the primetime TV news program 60 Minutes, practicing an adrenaline-pumping technique he perfected to teach students French vocabulary. To remind a student of the French word for egg, he suddenly smashed an egg on the student's head while shouting the word œuf. The grateful student would never forget that word again. He, of course, went on to a stellar career as a poultry farmer in Provence. Adrenaline pumping, with or without eggs, is not an easy thing to do during a lecture in a large auditorium. A lecture is often a one-way, passive affair, as I'm demonstrating right now. During a classroom lecture, students tend to use their mind only as a transcription medium between the lecturer's speech and their notebooks. In contrast, during a tutorial, the thrill of exploration, the anxiety of engagement, the exhilaration of epiphany, and even the potential embarrassment of saying the wrong thing would keep the adrenaline pumping. No smashing of eggs on heads is needed. The ideal tutorial is a cathartic roller coaster of the mind. The tutorial is dynamic, the classroom is static. So echoing Ronald Reagan's famous exhortation to Gorbachev in Berlin, I say, tongue-in-cheek, President Choueiri, tear down the classroom. The tutorial is most effective when combined with another form of active engagement, that of pre-reading. Reading is a solitary but active act of conquest, of intellectual aggression, of self-propelled discovery. When we read, we are in full control. We can stop, reread, skip, fast forward, and daydream without the risk of missing content, which remains there awaiting us in black and white on the page. In the ideal college, there is no substitute for reading. And while the stifling autocracy of the classroom should be toppled in favor of the tutorial's charged exploration, the old tradition of homework and preparatory reading should be extolled more than ever. There is no better index for the success of a college education than the degree to which a student's thirst to read and pleasure in reading has been raised. A student, no matter how brilliant, should not get a college diploma before developing the aptitude for avaricious and critical reading. A graduate who does not read much is as unqualified as a pilot who does not fly much. Therefore, in my utopian tutorial-centered liberal arts college, the lecture is abolished, reading is exalted, and tutorial-based inter-peer conversation is the main mode of exploration. Learning becomes an active elucidation and exploration of what was read, and not a passive one-way lecture on material that could just as well have been read without the lecturer. Teaching theoretical physics, for example, becomes a discussion of thought experiments based on the pre-read material. Teaching applied sciences becomes an active exploration led by the tutor in an actual laboratory. Teaching literature becomes a tutor-mediated sparring among students having subjective interpretations of a pre-read text, carried out from cozy and plump armchairs. We are often told that the research university and the liberal arts college have fundamentally different missions. I'm not so sure. I believe they should both be in the same business, the business of discovery and invention. At the research university, faculty members should practice the business of discovery and invention and teach. And at the liberal arts college, faculty should be teaching the practice of discovery and invention. I'm therefore preaching the merger of the two 19th century models of the university that Dean McGreevy talked about yesterday, the von Humboldt German model on the one hand, and the American liberal arts college model on the other. I keep repeating the word practice, as in practice a trade, and that is precisely how I mean it. Professional trade schools, like HIT, are all about practice. Higher education snobs look down at trade schools, while in fact, trade schools offer something very worthy of emulation, an obsession with practice. At HIT, they obsessively practice the art of burger flipping. Similarly, the liberal arts college's obsession should be the practice of critical thinking. The rote of burger flipping becomes the model for the rote of critical thinking. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, popularized the idea that 10,000 hours of guided practice are needed to truly master any mentally based aptitude. Becoming a licensed airline pilot requires 1,500 hours of flight time. The Hamburger Institute of Technology, I'm told, requires almost that many hours of guided practice from its students to master the art of flipping burgers. The main goal of the tutorial in liberal arts college, like the freewheeling inter-peer conversations in Sam Humphrey's smoking room, is to practice the art of thinking and exploration. To graduate, it is not the number of credits that should be counted, but the number of hours of such exploration practice. At 2 tutorials per day, 5 days per week, 15 weeks per semester, 2 semesters per year, and 4 years per diploma, a graduate student, or a student to be graduated, should log 2,400 hours of intellectual burger flipping before he is licensed to fly into the world. Now let us continue the math and add up the tab, as someone must pay for all this to happen. Lest I start sounding like a US presidential candidate who promises untold wonderful programs with no accounting for cost. At 1 professor tutor for each 3 students, and 2 tutorial sessions per day, the AUB, with an undergraduate student body of 6,676 undergraduates, would need 1,112 tutors. So if you continue the math, you would find that for an investment of less than $80 million a year, the AUB could become the first tutorial-based university in the Middle East. And with adrenaline-pumping tutorials, you can save on the cost of 2.1 million eggs. We may then imagine, in the future, a page from the memoirs of an AUB undergraduate from the year 2026 to go as follows. 9 a.m., woke up, not a trace of a hangover. Must be the good quality of that arak last night. Arak Tuma, of course. 9:10 a.m., sat in bed and watched the news on my holographic iPhone 16s with 3D audio, of course. The Lebanese parliament just canceled its 423rd session for electing a president of the republic. But the economy continues booming thanks to peace in the Middle East, negotiated in 2020 by Tariq Mitri, and thanks to the exponentially growing AUB graduates-dominated financial IT industry in Ras Beirut. 9:30 a.m., skipped lecture on Arabic poetry. No one goes to lectures. I sleep better here. Instead, I will go to Professor Bilal Orfali's room for a tutorial on Adonis. 10 a.m., shower. My reading yesterday came back streaming vividly in my head under the water jet. Whoever invented the shower should get the Nobel Prize. 10:30 a.m., ran to Professor Orfali's room, arriving 4 minutes late. Lamia was already there, with a grin on her face. I could tell she had read all of the 4 volumes of Adonis's The Static and Dynamic, cover to cover. She is ready to put me in my place. It does not help that she is gorgeous. 10:35 a.m., Professor Orfali started by asking if we agree with Adonis's thesis in Al-Thabit wal-Mutawahawil that the struggle between the conservative and innovative streams of Arabic poetry is always won by the conservative stream because it implicitly claims unassailability on the account of its allegiance to the religious canon. Lamia agreed. I pointed out to her that by agreeing, she is implicitly claiming unassailability on the account of her allegiance to the academic canon. She said, okay, call me Al-Thabita, the static one. And I said, I guess that makes me Al-Mutahawil, the dynamic one. And so the battle lines were drawn, and the sparring began. She argued that innovations that are not threatened by quelling are not worthy innovations. I countered that scientific revolutions often swiftly topple established traditions without much struggle. She retorted that this is because science is too binary about the truth and poetry is not. And I argued back that science at its purest is a form of poetry. Professor Orfali, an expert on Sufism, waded in with both mediation and insight with examples of how Sufi thinkers were handled as challengers to the established static tradition, and how they handled challenges from within their own ranks. Then Professor Katie Rantous from the physics department stopped by and entered the fray. She explained that in physics, the static is dynamic when observed from the reference frame of the dynamic, and that the laws of physics are invariant, thus static, in all inertial systems. And this very staticity is the central tenet of Einstein's theory of special relativity, which, unlike the classroom, is unlikely to ever be toppled. It was exhilarating intellectually. Classic AUB tutorial at its best. The date is April 23rd, 2026. 5 years after President Choueiri succeeded in turning the AUB into the first tutorial-based university in the Middle East, and succeeded in changing the university's motto to the AUB, Flipping burgers of the mind. Thank you.